Thank you for joining our weekly Management Matters show with Paragon Intel. I'm CEO Ty Popplewell, joined as always by our president, Colby Howard. And we have special guest, Bill Campbell, our director of research on the show as well. So Bill, we got to start with you. What is new in the world of management track research this week?
So we closed our buy recommendation on Westrock and new CEO David Sewell, following his hiring of CommScope CFO Alex Pease. The sources we spoke to on Sewell when he was hired at Westrock told us that he needs a very strong CFO because that's his blind spot. Now, Alex Pease has a manager track rating of 0.1, which is he's the absolute lowest ranked executive out of over 3,800 on the management track platform. So we think he has a high probability of destroying value at the company. We also have new content out this week on Cerner, AutoNation, and SunRun. With Cerner, we published our first 4 interviews on the new CEO, David Feinberg. His sources were mixed on him, 2 positive and 2 neutral. The sources were positive on his ability to drive growth and improve the product, but they were concerned about his ability to control costs. On AutoNation, we published 7 interviews on new CEO Mike Manley. They were universally positive on him. They think that he has an excellent knowledge of auto dealers, and early in his tenure before he was CEO of FCA, he successfully restructured Daimler's contracts with dealers in the UK. Then he also rebuilt Jeep's dealerships in India from scratch within 6 months. And then with SunRun, we published the first 3 interviews on CEO Powell. The sources provide mixed feedback. 2 were very positive and 1 was very negative. We expect to publish more interviews on her next week, and the CEO analysis will be soon behind.
Busy week in research, Bill. I'm sure you and your team had a lot going on. I can't believe you found a worse executive than Gelslinger. Well done. That's hard to do historically. Can you talk about what do you have coming off embargo or what's coming out early next week?
So we have 2 bespoke projects, Enphase and Accenture, coming off embargo on Sunday and Monday. Enphase, we think, is particularly interesting because, 1, they reported earnings this week and it was up almost 30%, but also because there's a short report out there that makes accusations of fraud. So our customer engaged us on the bespoke project to prove or disprove that short seller's report. And so we have some pretty interesting takeaways from that we're publishing early next week.
You're not going to tell us, Bill. I like that. What about any new, did you initiate work on any new situations that are worth highlighting?
So Corteva and Willis Towers Watson were added to our pipeline this week. Corteva has a new external CEO, Chuck Magro from Nutrien, and Willis Towers Watson has an incoming CEO, Charles Hess. Both of those are very interesting, one because Corteva is the external change, but they also have 2 activists involved who force CEO changes at the companies.
Interesting. Colby, what did we see in the world of appearances, podcasts, and videos?
Yeah, absolutely. It's in addition to our proprietary research, you had some pretty under the radar appearances by some very important CEOs or C-suite executives. One, Mark Zuckerberg obviously made a lot of news with the transition to Meta, but he was not going the traditional media route when it came to interviews. He was going more independent media, one being Stratechery, which is Ben Thompson's technology blog. And they had a 45-minute conversation, really in the weeds, diving into the various pieces. These are people that actually understand the metaverse. These are people that understand the blockchain, that understand the future of how Web3 actually comes into existence. This is not the normal media. You want to unpack how the future of Facebook or Meta actually evolves. This is where you learn it. And so fascinating conversation, definitely want to dive into. Then you have Jamie Dimon going on Jon Stewart's podcast. Kind of a huge risk for someone like Jamie Dimon. Didn't need to do this. Jon Stewart does not take any bullshit from government officials, corporate types. You don't get much in terms of strategy for JP Morgan, but you do get a sense of how Jamie Dimon thinks of himself as a public figure and what the future of this country needs. Really fascinating conversation. On the podcast side, you get someone who doesn't get much airtime, and that's the COO of Salesforce, Bret Taylor, talking to Graycroft, the venture capital firm. And he talks about the difference between being a product-led organization versus a sales-led organization, the push and pull of that at Salesforce. And considering he's COO, operationally, how has Salesforce adapted and how will they adapt to COVID and remote work? Really good conversation to listen to. And then finally, HP CEO Enrique Lores had a really, really interesting take on ESG. We talk about ESG, usually it's puff pieces. This guy actually quantifies how sustainability has driven revenue. They're getting RFPs saying you need to be sustainable. HP has made sustainability a core tenet of their future growth. They've driven $1 billion of new revenue because they are sustainable. Really interesting quantification of how being sustainable can lead to new revenue sources. Definitely worth a listen.
Thanks, Colby. That's a wrap for the Management Matters weekly show. Want to thank Bill Campbell for being a special guest on the show this week. And just a reminder, all research discussed, all the appearances are all on Management Track. We also will have links in the show notes below. And thanks, everyone. Have a great weekend.